My stepsister hugged my mother at dinner and whispered, "Your daughter told me she wishes you were dead." I was standing right there when she said it. My stepsister, Laurel, had her arms wrapped around my mother in one of those long, dramatic hugs that she had perfected over the 2 years since her father married my mom. I was 3 feet away clearing the dinner table because I always cleared the table. Laurel never cleared the table because Laurel had convinced everyone that she was too fragile for chores. She was 22 years old and too fragile to carry a plate to the sink. I heard her whisper it into my mother's ear. "She told me she wishes you were dead." My mother's body went stiff. She pulled back from the hug and looked at Laurel with tears forming in her eyes. Then she looked at me. The look on her face was something I had never seen before. It was hurt and confusion and something that looked like fear. I asked what was wrong. My mother shook her head and walked out of the room without answering. Laurel watched her go with a sad expression that didn't reach her eyes. Then she turned to me and smiled. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see it. Then the sad face came back and she followed my mother out of the kitchen. I stood there holding dirty dishes and trying to understand what had just happened. My mother avoided me for 3 days after that. She gave short answers when I asked her questions. She stopped sitting next to me on the couch during movie nights. She started closing her bedroom door when she saw me coming down the hallway. I asked her repeatedly what was wrong. She said nothing. She said she was just tired. She said I should spend more time with Laurel because Laurel really wanted us to be close. That was when I knew something was very wrong. My mother had never pushed me toward Laurel before because my mother knew I didn't like Laurel. I didn't like Laurel because Laurel was a liar. I had caught her in small lies since the day she moved in. She told her father that I ate the last of the ice cream when she had eaten it. She told my mother that I had insulted her outfit when I had said nothing. She told everyone that I refused to include her in plans when she was the one who declined every invitation. But those were small lies. Annoying lies. I never imagined she would tell a lie this big. I tried to talk to my mother again. I asked her directly if Laurel had said something about me. My mother started crying. She said she didn't want to talk about it. She said she just needed time. She said maybe I should stay with my father for a while. My parents had been divorced since I was 12. My father lived 40 minutes away, and I saw him every other weekend. My mother was suggesting I move out of my childhood home because of something Laurel had whispered in her ear. I went to find Laurel. She was in her bedroom, which used to be our guest room before she colonized it with pink curtains and fairy lights. I asked her what she told my mother. She looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and said she didn't know what I was talking about. I said I heard you whisper something at dinner. She said I must have misheard. I said I know you said something about me. She smiled again. That same smile from the kitchen. Then she said, maybe my mother was just finally seeing the real me. I asked what that meant. She said my mother had always wanted a daughter who appreciated her. She said my mother had always wanted someone who would stay close and take care of her and be her best friend. She said I was too independent and too distant and too focused on my own life. She said my mother deserved better. She said my mother deserved her. I told her she was insane. She said I was jealous. I left her room and went straight to my mother. I told her everything. I told her Laurel had been lying about me. I told her I never said I wished she was dead. I told her I loved her and I would never say anything like that. My mother looked at me with tired eyes and said Laurel had warned her I would deny it. She said Laurel had told her I would try to turn her against Laurel. She said Laurel had been so worried about telling her the truth because Laurel knew I would make her look like the bad guy. The trap was perfect. Laurel had set it up so that anything I said would only confirm what she had already planted. I was stuck. I moved in with my father that weekend. Not because I wanted to, but because my mother asked me to give her space. She said she needed time to process her feelings. She said maybe some distance would help our relationship. Laurel hugged me goodbye and said she hoped we could be close someday. My father was confused about why I had suddenly appeared with a suitcase. I told him everything. He believed me immediately because my father had never trusted Laurel. He said something about her eyes seemed empty. He was right. I stayed with my father for 2 months. During that time, I visited my mother twice. Both times Laurel was there hovering around her like a shadow. Both times my mother seemed distant and uncomfortable. Laurel had won. She had stolen my mother and there was nothing I could do about it. Then Laurel made a mistake. I walked into the campus coffee shop 3 days later because I needed caffeine before my afternoon class. The place smelled like burned espresso and cinnamon rolls. I was standing in line scrolling through my phone when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around and saw a girl about my age with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was staring at me with this weird expression like she recognized me but couldn't remember from where. She asked if I was Laurel's stepsister. I felt my stomach drop because nobody at the school knew about Laurel except my closest friends. I asked how she knew that. She said her name was Octavia and she used to be Laurel's roommate freshman year. She said Laurel showed her pictures of me back when they lived together. I said yes, I was the stepsister and asked how she was handling having Laurel in her life now. Octavia's face changed completely. She asked if we could sit down and talk. I forgot about my coffee and followed her to a corner table near the windows. She sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. She asked how I was dealing with living with Laurel. I told her I wasn't living with Laurel anymore because I had moved in with my father. Octavia nodded like that made perfect sense. She said Laurel told everyone she transferred schools because of better academic opportunities. I said that's what Laurel told our family too. Octavia leaned forward and said that wasn't why Laurel left. She said Laurel left because Octavia and 2 other girls reported her to residential life for creating a hostile living situation. I felt my heart start beating faster. I asked what Laurel did. Octavia started talking and I just listened. She said Laurel was her roommate for exactly 4 months before Octavia requested an emergency room transfer. She said at first Laurel seemed sweet and friendly and a little shy. She said Laurel would make cookies and share them and always asked about Octavia's day. Then Octavia started dating this guy named John who lived on the 3rd floor. Laurel met John a few times when he came to pick Octavia up for dates. Octavia said John started acting weird after about a month. He would ask her strange questions about whether she really wanted to be with him. He would get upset over tiny things that never bothered him before. He accused her of complaining about him to her friends. Octavia had no idea what he was talking about. Then one night, John told her that Laurel had been texting him. Octavia pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots she still had saved. The messages were from Laurel to John saying that Octavia talked about him constantly in their dorm room. Laurel told John that Octavia called him controlling and boring. Laurel said Octavia only stayed with him because she didn't want to be alone. John believed it at first because why would Laurel lie? Octavia had to show John her actual text messages with her friends where she never said anything bad about him. She had to prove she wasn't the person Laurel described. John finally believed her when he saw the evidence. That's when Octavia realized something was very wrong with Laurel. She asked Laurel why she sent those messages. Laurel cried and said she misunderstood things Octavia said. She said she was just trying to help John see the truth. Octavia knew that was garbage. She went to talk to the girl who had Laurel as a roommate before her. That girl told Octavia the exact same thing happened with her younger sister. Laurel had whispered lies to the sister trying to turn her against the roommate. The pattern was identical. I asked Octavia if she would be willing to talk to my mother about what happened. Octavia said yes immediately. She said she felt guilty for not warning people about Laurel when she transferred. She said Laurel shouldn't get away with destroying families the way she destroyed friendships. I felt something shift in my chest. This was real evidence. This was proof that Laurel had done this before to other people. We exchanged phone numbers right there at the table. Octavia said to call her anytime and she would tell my mother everything. I thanked her about 6 times. I left the coffee shop without ever getting my coffee. I walked back to my father's apartment in a daze. I had the first real evidence that Laurel had a documented pattern of this exact behavior. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't text or call Octavia from home because I didn't want Laurel seeing my phone and getting suspicious. I saved Octavia's number under a fake name. I made a note in my phone with everything Octavia told me. I wrote down the timeline and the details about John and the previous roommate. I had to document everything before I forgot any details. The next week, I spent every free minute reaching out to people from Laurel's past. Octavia had given me names and information. She told me about the girl who roomed with Laurel before her. Her name was Isadora Cross, and she was a year older than us. I found Isadora on social media and sent her a message explaining who I was. I said I was Laurel's stepsister and I needed to know what happened between them. Isadora responded within an hour. She said she had been waiting for someone from Laurel's family to reach out. She said she tried to warn Laurel's father about her behavior, but he never responded to her messages. Isadora and I met at a different coffee shop across town. She brought a notebook with her. She said she had been in therapy for 8 months dealing with trust issues because of what Laurel did. Isadora told me that Laurel roomed with her for 1 semester. During that time, Laurel systematically tried to alienate Isadora from her younger sister Kendall. Laurel would tell Kendall that Isadora complained about her constantly. Laurel said Isadora called Kendall annoying and immature. Laurel told Kendall that Isadora only pretended to care about her. Kendall believed it because she was only 17, and Laurel seemed so concerned and genuine. The sisters stopped talking for 3 months. Their relationship almost broke permanently. Isadora only figured out what happened when Kendall finally confronted her with specific quotes that Isadora never said. They realized together that all the quotes came from conversations with Laurel. Isadora was angry enough about what Laurel did that she offered to write a detailed statement about the manipulation tactics. She said she would testify if needed. She said Laurel was dangerous and she needed to be stopped. 2 weeks after meeting Octavia, I had statements from 3 different people describing Laurel's pattern. Octavia wrote everything down about John and the text messages. Isadora wrote a 4-page statement about Kendall and the sister relationship. I also found a third person through Isadora. This was a girl named Maya who lived across the hall from Laurel and Isadora. Maya witnessed Laurel's behavior and wrote a statement supporting what Isadora said. I had documentation. I had evidence. I had proof of a clear pattern. Then I found something else. I was searching online for any other information about Laurel. I found a local news article about a youth mentorship program at the community center near where Laurel used to live. The article mentioned that the program had to implement new volunteer screening procedures after an incident. I called the community center and asked to speak to someone about their mentorship program. The woman who answered transferred me to the program director. I explained that I was doing research on volunteer programs for a school project. I asked about their screening procedures. The director was happy to talk about it. She said they updated everything after they had to ask a volunteer to leave. She didn't say Laurel's name, but she described the incident. A parent complained that the volunteer told their 12-year-old daughter that her mother didn't really love her. The volunteer said the mother was just pretending to care. The girl went home crying and told her mother what the volunteer said. The mother called the program immediately. They investigated and asked the volunteer to leave. The director said it was the most disturbing thing she had seen in 15 years running the program. I asked when this happened. She said about 8 months ago. That was right before Laurel's father married my mother. The pattern was clear and documented, but I needed to figure out how to present this to my mother without Laurel intercepting. I decided to approach Stanley's brother Julian. Julian lived in Oregon and was visiting for a long weekend. He was flying in on Friday and staying until Monday. I had always liked Julian. He was kind and funny, and he barely knew Laurel because she lived with her mother in California until the marriage. Laurel wouldn't have had time to manipulate him yet. I texted Julian and asked if he wanted to meet for coffee on Saturday morning. I said I wanted to catch up. He said sure and suggested a place near his hotel. I told my father I was meeting Julian. My father thought it was a good idea. He said Julian seemed like a reasonable person who might actually listen. Saturday morning, I drove to the coffee shop with all my documentation in a folder. Julian was already there when I arrived. He He gave me a hug and ordered us both coffee. We sat down at a table in the back. He asked how school was going. I said school was fine, but I needed to talk to him about something serious. His expression changed. I opened the folder and showed him everything I had gathered. The statements from Octavia and Isadora and Maya, the information about the volunteer program incident, the timeline showing Laurel's pattern of behavior. Julian read through everything carefully. He didn't interrupt. He just read, and occasionally his eyebrows went up. When he finished, he sat back in his chair and stared at me. He asked if this was all real. I said yes, and I could put him in touch with any of these people to verify. He rubbed his face with both hands. Julian said he was shocked, but he also wasn't completely surprised. He said he always found Laurel's helpless act a bit excessive, but he assumed it was just her personality. He said some people are just more dependent than others. I told him it wasn't about being dependent. I told him Laurel was deliberately manipulative and she targeted close relationships to destroy them. Julian asked what I wanted him to do. I said I needed him to observe Laurel carefully during his visit. I said I needed him to watch how she acts when she thinks nobody is paying attention. I said if he noticed anything concerning, he should talk to Stanley privately. Julian agreed. He said he would pay close attention. He promised to talk to Stanley if he saw anything that matched what I described. I felt relieved to have an ally inside the house who Laurel wouldn't suspect was watching her. We finished our coffee and Julian said he would text me after the weekend. I drove back to my father's apartment feeling like maybe things were finally starting to shift. Julian's visit happened over the next 3 days. He stayed at a hotel but spent most of his time at my mother's house with Stanley and Laurel. I got updates through text messages. Julian said everything seemed normal at first. Laurel was sweet and attentive. She made breakfast Sunday morning. She asked Julian about his life in Oregon. She seemed genuinely interested in his job and his hobbies. Then Sunday afternoon something happened. Julian texted me that night with 3 exclamation points. He said he saw exactly what I described. He said Laurel made a critical mistake. He was sitting in the living room reading a book while my mother and Laurel were in the kitchen. Stanley was outside grilling chicken for dinner. My mother asked Laurel to grab something from the pantry. Laurel snapped at her with real anger in her voice. Julian said the tone was vicious. Laurel told my mother to get it herself because she wasn't a servant. My mother sounded shocked and hurt. Then Laurel seemed to remember Julian was in the next room. Julian said he watched through the doorway as Laurel's entire face transformed. The anger disappeared and the sweet, sad expression came back. Laurel apologized to my mother in this soft voice. She said she was just stressed about family stuff. She said she didn't mean to snap. My mother accepted the apology immediately. But Julian saw the whole thing. He saw Laurel's face change from cold to sweet in about 2 seconds. He texted me that he believed everything I told him. He said he would talk to Stanley before he left on Monday. Julian talked to Stanley privately Monday morning before his flight. He told me about it later over the phone. He said he sat Stanley down and showed him the statements I had gathered. He explained that Laurel had a documented history of this specific manipulation pattern with multiple people over several years. Stanley was defensive at first. He said those girls probably misunderstood Laurel. He said Laurel was sensitive and people sometimes took things the wrong way. Julian pressed him. He said this wasn't about misunderstanding. He said this was about a clear pattern of deliberate manipulation. He told Stanley about what he witnessed in the kitchen. He described how Laurel's face changed when she remembered he was watching. Stanley got quiet. Julian said Stanley looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. Stanley said he needed time to think about this. He said he needed to pay attention to things he might have missed. Julian told him that was fair, but he needed to actually investigate before dismissing it. Stanley agreed reluctantly. Julian could tell Stanley wanted to believe his daughter was innocent, but Julian planted the seed of doubt. That was all I needed. Laurel must have sensed something was wrong because she escalated fast. 2 days after Julian left, my mother called my father's house. She sounded upset and angry. She said she needed to talk to me immediately. I got on the phone and asked what was wrong. My mother said Laurel told her I had been sending threatening text messages. She said Laurel was afraid of me. She said Laurel showed her messages where I threatened to hurt her. My stomach dropped. I hadn't texted Laurel in over a month. I told my mother that wasn't true. My mother demanded to see my phone. She said she was coming over right now to check. I said fine, come over. I had nothing to hide. My mother showed up 20 minutes later. She was shaking. I handed her my phone unlocked. I told her to look at every message. She scrolled through everything. She checked my texts with Laurel. The last message was from 6 weeks ago saying okay when Laurel asked if I could move my stuff out of the bathroom. There was nothing threatening. There was barely anything at all. My mother looked confused. She asked where the threatening messages were. I said there weren't any because I never sent them. I asked what exactly Laurel claimed I said. My mother described messages that supposedly threatened to expose Laurel and ruin her life. Messages that said I would make sure everyone hated her. None of those messages existed on my phone. My mother sat down on the couch. She looked at my phone again. She looked at me. Something was finally breaking through. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her face. She put my phone down on the couch cushion between us. Her hands were shaking a little. She asked me again what exactly Laurel had claimed I wrote. I told her Laurel said I sent messages threatening to expose her and ruin her life. My mother looked down at my phone again like maybe she had missed something. She picked it up and scrolled through the messages with Laurel one more time. There was nothing there except basic stuff about sharing the bathroom and dinner times. My mother asked if I had deleted anything. I said no and told her she could check my deleted messages folder if she wanted. She did. There was nothing in there either except some spam texts I had cleared out last week. My mother set the phone down again and covered her face with her hands. I asked her if Laurel showed her the actual messages or just told her about them. My mother said Laurel had been crying so hard that she couldn't get her phone to work properly. She said Laurel promised to show her the messages later, but she seemed so upset and scared that my mother believed her immediately. I asked if there was anything else going on with Laurel that seemed strange. My mother looked at me for a long time. She asked quietly if I knew something she didn't. I told her I had information, but I needed her to hear it from other people and not just me. I said if I told her everything right now, she might think I was making it up to defend myself. My mother asked what kind of information. I said information about Laurel doing this exact same thing to other people. My mother went very still. She asked what I meant by exact same thing. I said Laurel has a pattern of whispering lies to turn people against each other, and I could prove it. My mother asked how. I told her I needed to arrange a meeting with someone who knew Laurel before she moved in with us. Someone who had no reason to lie. My mother agreed, but she looked scared. I called Octavia that night after my mother left. I asked if she and Isadora could meet my mother somewhere neutral to explain what happened with Laurel. Octavia said yes immediately and suggested a coffee shop halfway between our houses. I told my mother the time and place, but I didn't tell Laurel or Stanley anything about it. My mother asked if she should tell Stanley where she was going. I said no, because Stanley might mention it to Laurel, and Laurel would find a way to stop it. My mother looked uncomfortable, but she agreed. 3 days later, my mother met Octavia and Isadora at the coffee shop. I went with her, but I sat at a different table so they could talk without me hovering. I watched from across the room while Octavia and Isadora spent 2 hours describing everything Laurel had done. I saw my mother's face change as they talked. She started out looking defensive and skeptical. Then she looked confused. Then she looked sick. Octavia was showing her something on her phone, and my mother put her hand over her mouth. Isadora was talking and gesturing, and my mother started crying. Not loud crying, but quiet tears running down her face. When they finished talking, my mother came over to my table. She didn't say anything. She just stood there looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time in months. I asked if she was okay. She shook her head. We left the coffee shop and sat in her car in the parking lot. She told me Octavia described the exact same pattern. The whispered lies. The preemptive warnings that the victim would deny everything. The way Laurel positioned herself as the caring friend who was just worried. My mother said Isadora's story was almost identical, except Laurel had targeted her relationship with her sister instead of a boyfriend. She said the volunteer program incident matched too. She said she felt like she was going to throw up. My mother came to my father's house that same night. It was late, and my father answered the door looking worried. My mother asked if she could talk to me. My father let her in and then went upstairs to give us privacy. My mother sat on the couch and started crying hard. She said she didn't know what to believe anymore. She said she was afraid she had made a horrible mistake. I sat next to her and didn't say anything for a minute. Then I went to my room and got the folder with all the documentation I had gathered. I brought it back and showed her everything. The statements from Octavia and Isadora. The incident report from the volunteer program. The timeline I had made showing when each incident happened. My mother read through everything slowly. She kept wiping her eyes. When she finished, she told me Laurel had been saying increasingly strange things about me over the past few weeks. She said Laurel claimed I was planning to move out permanently and never speak to my mother again. She said Laurel told her I had been talking to my father about getting my mother to sign over some family heirlooms early because I didn't trust her anymore. My mother said those things seemed extreme, but she trusted Laurel because Laurel seemed so genuinely worried and caring. She said Laurel would cry about how much she wanted us to be a real family. My mother asked me why she didn't see it. I told her Laurel was really good at this. I said she had been practicing on people for years. Stanley caught Laurel in a lie 4 days after my mother met with Octavia and Isadora. Julian had already gone back home, but he had talked to Stanley before he left. Stanley told my mother about it later. He said he started paying real attention to what Laurel was saying and doing. He said he asked Laurel where she had been that afternoon, and she told him she went to the library to study. He asked what she was studying, and she said psychology homework. He asked to see her assignment, and she said she left it at the library. He asked why she would leave her homework at the library, and she changed her story. She said actually she had been at a coffee shop, not the library. He asked which coffee shop, and she named one across town. He asked why she went all the way across town, and she got frustrated. She said she went to meet a friend. He asked which friend, and she said he wouldn't know them. He pressed her, and she got angry. She accused him of interrogating her like a criminal. She said he was taking my side against his own daughter. Stanley said her reaction was so extreme and out of proportion that he realized something was very wrong. He said he started thinking back to other times when Laurel's stories didn't quite match up. Times when she blamed other people for things that seemed off. He said he felt sick thinking about how much he had excused because he wanted to believe his daughter was just sensitive and misunderstood. I suggested family therapy to my mother the next day. I said we needed professional help to sort through everything. I said having everyone in the same room with a therapist might be the only way to get the truth out. My mother agreed immediately. She said she would make the appointment. Stanley was harder to convince. My mother told me he kept saying he couldn't believe Laurel would do something this calculated. He said maybe there were misunderstandings. He said maybe Laurel was just struggling with the blended family situation and acting out. My mother told him that acting out didn't explain the identical pattern with 3 other people who had never met each other. She said it didn't explain the volunteer program incident. She said they needed to face this directly. Stanley finally agreed. My mother called a family therapist that my father had recommended. Her name was Valerie Potter, and she had experience with family manipulation dynamics. My mother made an appointment for the following week. When Stanley told Laurel about the therapy session, she tried to refuse. She said therapy was for crazy people. She said she didn't need someone analyzing her. Stanley told her it wasn't optional. Laurel started crying and said everyone was ganging up on her. Stanley didn't back down. He said the whole family was going, and that included her. Laurel spent the next few days trying desperately to fix everything. She was extra sweet to my mother. She made her breakfast in bed. She offered to go grocery shopping. She sat with my mother during her favorite TV shows and asked questions about the plot like she really cared. She cried about how stressed she was. She told my mother she felt like the whole family had turned against her. She said she didn't understand what she did to make me hate her so much. My mother told me about these conversations. She said Laurel kept waiting for her to jump in and reassure her that everything was fine. But my mother didn't do that this time. She just listened and said therapy would help them work through it. Laurel's face would fall every time my mother refused to comfort her. My mother said she could see Laurel getting more and more panicked. She said Laurel started following her around the house. She said Laurel would find excuses to be in whatever room my mother was in. She said it felt suffocating. The night before the therapy appointment, Laurel tried one last thing. She came into the living room where my mother and Stanley were watching TV. She was holding a piece of paper. She said she found something in the guest room closet while she was looking for an old sweater. She said it was a note I had written months ago. She handed the paper to my mother. My mother read it and her face went white. Stanley asked what it said. My mother showed him. The note said terrible things about my mother. It said she was selfish and fake. It said I couldn't wait to get away from her. It said I wished I had been raised by my father instead. Stanley took the paper and looked at it closely. He asked Laurel where exactly she found this. Laurel said it was tucked in a box of my old stuff. Stanley asked why I would write something like this and then leave it in a box at my mother's house. Laurel said maybe I forgot about it. Stanley kept looking at the paper. He asked my mother if the handwriting looked right. My mother said it looked similar, but something seemed off. Stanley went to get a birthday card I had given my mother last year. He put the card and the note side by side. The handwriting was similar but not the same. Some letters were formed differently. Stanley pointed this out. He also said the paper looked wrong. He asked Laurel what kind of notebook the note came from. Laurel said she didn't know it was just loose paper. Stanley said the paper had lines and a specific pattern. He went to my old room and looked through the notebooks I had left behind. None of them matched. He came back and told Laurel the paper was from a brand I had never used. Laurel said maybe I bought a new notebook. Stanley said that didn't make sense. Stanley looked at Laurel for a long time. Then he said quietly that he knew what she was doing. Laurel's face changed. The sweet, sad expression disappeared. She asked what he meant. Stanley said she just tried to forge a note right in front of them. He said the handwriting didn't match and the paper was wrong and the whole thing was obviously fake. Laurel started crying. She said she found the note and she was just trying to show them the truth. Stanley said no. She was trying to create evidence that didn't exist. He said he had been paying attention for the past week, and he saw the pattern now. He said she needed to tell the truth at therapy tomorrow. Laurel cried harder. She said everyone was crazy. She said everyone was attacking her for no reason. Stanley said her performance wasn't working anymore. He said people were actually looking at her actions now instead of just believing her tears. Laurel screamed that they were supposed to love her. She ran to her room and slammed the door. Stanley sat down next to my mother. My mother said he looked like someone had died. He told her he was sorry. He said he should have seen this sooner. The family therapy session happened on a Thursday afternoon. We all sat in Valerie Potter's office. It was a small room with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Valerie introduced herself and explained how the session would work. She said everyone would get a chance to share their perspective. She said the goal was to understand what happened and find a path forward. She asked who wanted to start. Laurel raised her hand immediately. She launched into her victim story. She said I had resented her from the moment she moved in. She said I made her feel unwelcome and excluded. She said I said horrible things about her and about my mother. She said she tried so hard to be my friend, but I rejected every attempt. She cried while she talked. Valerie listened without interrupting. When Laurel finished, Valerie thanked her for sharing. Then she asked if I wanted to respond. I said yes. I pulled out the folder I had brought. I told Valerie about Octavia and Isadora. I described the identical pattern of Laurel whispering lies to turn people against each other. I showed her the statements and the volunteer program incident report. I told her about the fake note from last night. I kept my voice calm and steady. I didn't cry or get emotional. I just presented the facts. Valerie looked through the documentation carefully. She asked Laurel if she remembered Octavia and Isadora. Laurel said yes, but they were just jealous of her. Valerie asked if she whispered things to Octavia's boyfriend about Octavia. Laurel said no. Valerie asked if she told Isadora's sister that Isadora didn't love her. Laurel said no. Valerie pointed out that 3 different people who didn't know each other described the exact same behavior pattern. She asked Laurel how that could be a coincidence. Laurel's face started to crack. She said people always misunderstood her. She said she was just trying to help. Valerie asked how telling someone their loved one hated them was helping. Laurel didn't answer. Valerie asked again. Laurel started crying different tears. These ones looked angry instead of sad. She said everyone always abandoned her. She said her mother abandoned her. She said her friends abandoned her. She said she had to protect herself. Valerie asked how she protected herself. Laurel screamed that she had to become the favorite first. She said if she made herself the most important person, then they couldn't leave her. She said my mother loved me more, so she had to take my place. The room went completely silent. Laurel looked around like she just realized what she said. She tried to take it back. She said she didn't mean it like that. But it was too late. The mask had dropped completely. Stanley was staring at his daughter like he didn't know her. My mother was crying. I just sat there feeling relieved that everyone finally heard the truth. Valerie asked Laurel if she understood that what she did was manipulation. Laurel said she was just trying to survive. Valerie said manipulation wasn't survival, it was harm. She said Laurel had hurt multiple people with her actions. Laurel said she didn't care. She said they all deserved it for not loving her enough. My mother made a sound like she had been punched. Stanley put his head in his hands. My mother's face crumpled. She pulled away from Stanley and came straight to me. She wrapped her arms around me and started sobbing into my shoulder. She kept saying she was sorry over and over. She said she was so sorry for not believing me. She said she was sorry for making me leave. She said she was sorry for choosing Laurel over me. I hugged her back and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for months. This was my mother. This was the person who raised me and loved me and knew me. Laurel had tried to steal that, but she hadn't succeeded completely. My mother was still in there under all the manipulation. We stood there hugging while Laurel sat on the couch looking furious. Her face wasn't sad anymore. She wasn't pretending to cry. She just looked angry that her plan had fallen apart. Stanley was staring at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. His face looked gray and old. He kept shaking his head slowly like he couldn't believe what he just heard. Valerie let us have that moment before she spoke again. She said she wanted to talk about next steps. She looked at Laurel and explained that what she had just described showed signs of attachment disorder. She said Laurel had learned to use manipulation to try to control her relationships because she was afraid of being abandoned. She said those patterns needed serious professional treatment. Laurel crossed her arms and said she didn't need treatment. Valerie said that wasn't optional if Laurel wanted to have healthy relationships in the future. She recommended intensive individual therapy at least twice a week with a specialist who dealt with attachment issues. Stanley nodded slowly. He said he would find someone and make sure Laurel went to every appointment. Then he looked at Laurel and said something I never expected to hear. He told her she needed to move back to her mother's house. Laurel's head snapped up. She started to protest, but Stanley held up his hand. He said the current living situation wasn't healthy for anyone. He said Laurel needed space to work on herself without the temptation to manipulate the people around her. Laurel said he was choosing them over his own daughter. Stanley's voice was firm when he answered. He said he loved her, but he wouldn't enable her hurting people anymore. He said she could get better, but she had to want to get better. He said living in our house and continuing to play games wasn't going to help her heal. 2 weeks later, I moved back home. Laurel had packed up her pink curtains and fairy lights and moved to her mother's place across town. She started therapy with a woman who specialized in personality disorders. Stanley drove her to appointments twice a week and checked in with the therapist regularly. My mother and I spent those first weeks back together having long conversations we should have had months ago. We talked about how the manipulation worked. We talked about why she was vulnerable to it. She explained that she wanted the blended family to work so badly that she ignored red flags. She said Laurel seemed so sweet and caring at first. She said Laurel knew exactly what to say to make her feel like the perfect stepmother. She said when Laurel told her I wished she was dead, it confirmed her worst fear that I resented the new marriage. I told her I understood why she believed it. I told her Laurel was good at what she did. I told her we needed to communicate better going forward instead of letting things build up. My mother agreed. She said she should have talked to me directly instead of pulling away. She said she let Laurel get between us because she was afraid of conflict. We promised each other we would be honest even when it was hard. 3 months passed. My relationship with my mother was stronger than it had been before any of this happened. We learned to talk openly about difficult things instead of avoiding them. We didn't pretend everything was perfect. We acknowledged when we were upset or confused. We asked questions instead of making assumptions. Stanley and my mother were in couples therapy working through the breach of trust. Stanley felt guilty for bringing Laurel into our lives. My mother felt guilty for not protecting me. They were learning to forgive themselves and each other. Stanley maintained boundaries with Laurel while supporting her treatment from a distance. He talked to her therapist regularly. He visited her once a week for supervised meetings. He didn't let her move back home. Laurel was making slow progress in therapy according to her treatment team. She was starting to understand how her behavior hurt people. She had a long way to go. I was back in my childhood home sleeping in my own room. The family would never be what we hoped when Stanley and my mother got married. We wouldn't have happy blended family dinners with everyone getting along. But we had something more real now. We had honest conversations and clear boundaries. We had trust that came from working through hard things together instead of pretending they didn't exist. Laurel's manufactured version of our family had been all performance and no substance. What we built after everything fell apart felt solid in a way her version never did.